Here come the pieces down, you know. Well, here it is, friends. Once again, we're faced with the necessity of looking that blank face of reality right smack in the blank face of reality's eye, right? Well, that's like I'm saying that you got to look at the way it is once in a while, and since you have to look at the way it is, you better look. You know, speaking of looking at the way it is, I've always felt for a long time that the only real difference between us and the Europeans is that the Europeans have lived through so much hogwash in their time. You know, they have about 10 million years of history behind them, and our history really doesn't go back much beyond, 1620 maybe at the very outside. And that's greasy kid stuff to a real European. I've been in European cities where they kept referring to the new town. They say, well, of course, you're going over to Newtown. That's the new subdivision. And it turns out the new subdivision was built in the latter days of the Second Children's Crusade. And literally, they do this. And in fact, there is in Zurich, they always refer to the new city and the old city. And if you go to the old city, of course, that's the old city. I mean, that's really the old city. They have streets made of old skulls of Neanderthal man. I mean, it's that old. I mean, really old city. The new city was completed about the time that Richard the Lionhearted was bagging his first rabbit. He was not yet quite in the lion class, and that's considered the new city. Well, this is, of course, a completely different concept from America. Here in New York City, a building that is still standing and was built in 1949 is considered one of the neighborhood relics. And they point it out. They really do. They'll say, well, I like an old building. And you'll say, well, what do you mean an old building? You know, I was living in a building here a couple of years ago that was finished in 1951, and everybody in the elevator would congratulate themselves every couple of days and say, you know, it sure is great to live in an old building. You know, I was visiting a friend of mine the other day, and he's in one of these new places, you know, built out of Reynolds wrap, and you can hear the Johns flushing up and down from all the 4 floors away. You hear arguments over in the next wing of the building, which is across the street. I don't know, they must have some kind of few things. And we'd congratulate each other. We'd say, isn't it great to live in an old building? 1951. Well, that old building is now a hole in the ground. That old building finally was done away with, and they're building another building, which in a couple of years will be an old building, and they'll do away with that. Well, now, this is the concept of America. Literally, actually is. And our sense of reality, of course, is limited. It has to be limited when you live in a world that blows away. Have you ever spent any time on a set, an actual set? I'm talking about on a stage set. Well, after a while, it's funny. I did a play here a couple of years ago where the whole set, the set itself, it was a one set play, and the set was my apartment. The guy that I was playing lived in this pad. This was his apartment, you see. And it had a kitchen over here to one side, and over here was where the phone was and the desk, and there was where the bed folded out of the wall. You can imagine all the funny business that went on with the bed that folded out of the wall. You can just see what limitless possibilities for a really good comic writer to really let himself go. You know, a good one like Max Schulman, one of the deep comic writers. What a turkey. Well, nevertheless, yeah. And here was this set. This set was the pad. Now I would come to rehearse about 3 or 4 days before the play actually opened. We were rehearsing on the set itself, and all day long I would be on this set in my pad. And after about 3 days of this, it became almost, in a way, more real than my real pad. For one thing, whenever it all got messed up, I would walk away, and the stage hands would come and straighten it all up. You know, they didn't. I didn't have to do anything about it, and then somehow this was better. I kind of liked it better, and everything was nailed down. That's another thing I like about a stage set kind of pad. It's nailed down, and you have a total sense of irresponsibility when you're living in a stage set. Literally, you do. For example, you can be wrestling with a guy in the second act. There was a big scene where I'm wrestling with this guy. Well, you kick the lamp over, and the lamp goes boom all over the floor, And you know that tomorrow morning the stage department, the set department will have another laugh. You know, you're not going to spare the pieces and so on. And so I began to like my stage set. To boil it down, I began to dig living there. And I'd come up there before the show. The curtain would be at 8:40. About 7 o'clock, the curtain is down, you see, and it's dark. And I'd go in my little pad. I'd walk around in my pad. You never thought of actors doing that, did you? Oh, sure. You'd be surprised at how much Hamlet begins to love having that castle. Hamlet certainly, no matter who plays Hamlet, one of the reasons everybody wants to play Hamlet, I mean, he's a prince, you know. That's not an insurance salesman. You got a castle, and you're heroic, and it's just wild, you know, it's a great scene. And so after a while, it's not uncommon before the curtain goes up on Hamlet to see the prince, whoever is playing the prince, stalking the ramparts. He's literally in the darkness up there. He loves being there. He likes being there, and everybody is kind of nice to him because he's a prince after all, you know. And so I would come in. He's not little Jaime Epstein that comes from the Bronx any longer. He's the Prince of Denmark. And that's a big difference. Let me tell you, that is not Fordham Road there, Elsinore Castle. And I kind of liked this pad, and I'd come in there and I'd walk around the darkness and I'd plunk down on that cardboard settee they had, and kind of like that too. And it was my place, you see. And then came, of course, the inevitable day when the set was what they call struck. Well, now I'll have to tell you, there's another odd thing about that too that has not been discussed too often in the sense of striking a set. At first, there is a sense of regret, and then there's, following that, a sense of relief, because you are relieved of your responsibility of even being on the set. Because I think man's total drive all throughout all of history has been to get out of responsibility, to get away from it all. What do you call progress? Everything that we have made has been to make it so that we don't have to walk, so that we don't breathe the air. We have machines now that process the air. We have machines that think of things for us. Millions and millions of machines now that do all the work. And in fact, did you read in the paper the other day, one of the scary little things in the paper, back in the department in the Times where they have inventions and they have, have you ever seen that department back there? It's in the ad department. It has little inventions and things. And there was a little piece there about a jurist somewhere, some insane nut, someplace, a jurist, a legal light, and he was saying that he feels that eventually the courts will have computers to decide the merits of one case or the other. How do you like that scene? Did you read about that? Oh yes, he says that he feels that since we've done so much with these great machines that we've so almost perfected them. I don't know what perfecting the machine means. Does perfecting the machine mean that the machine will be more like us than us? Is the perfect machine a man? It's a good question, you know. When you say perfect the computer, we always talk about perfect it. Well, what do you mean by perfect it? Does that mean it's more like us than we are? Like most characters that are in novels and in plays are far more human than people are in real life. They cry more. They're more involved with each other than in real life. Have you noticed that in plays and in books and in dramas, one thing and another? Oh, sure. Most people just don't say the things to each other that they say in books. They don't relate to each other in the same way. Now, that's going to sound... I'm sorry, they just don't. In short, the writer's duty, then, is to perfect the man. Let's say even make him more vulnerable than he is in real life. That's called perfectibility in the art sense. In short, if the character... Let's say Holden Caulfield is far more sensitive than any 16-year-old guy ever is. Which makes him a more perfect 16-year-older. He is a creation of a man's mind. Now, do we define the perfect machine as the machine that is more human-like? In short, it worries, the eventual machine will have to worry. It'll have to have fears. Probably the more perfect the machine, the more the machine will also have desires of its own and also ambitions. And eventually, the most perfect machine of all will be the machine that will be aware of the danger from mankind itself. He will say, mankind is plotting to take over. Either that or they are holding us down. Oh yes, mankind is discriminating completely against machines. You know that, of course. Why, let's face it, it's certainly not allowing, would you want your daughter to marry one? Okay. Yes, somebody will answer, yes. Eventually they will. And so the problem is quite complex, this business of what is a perfect machine. And so here we sit, waiting for it to happen, and we're working our way towards it. Now, I suspect that our whole drive, ever since the very beginning of time, has been to elude or somehow evade or at least smooth over responsibility of one kind or another. That's called progress. That if we could get the world to run by itself and have a gigantic key coming out somewhere near Greenland, a big key that would be wound up every couple of years by some cosmic force, the whole world would run as a machine itself. Man then could forever live in a playpen, forever have whoopsie fun and run around and blow up little balloons and dance dances and play guitars all the time, and the world runs itself. This has been an old dream of mankind, and I suspect we're continuing and will always pursue it. Now, the idea of evading responsibility, which could be called progress, is not new, and certainly it's not only part of what we call the civilized world. Have you been reading about the President Johnson cult that's been growing like mad out in Port Moresby? I have. Well, all right. Now I have a later bulletin on it. A couple of weeks ago on the show, we talked about this cult in Port Moresby of natives who somewhere along the line had evolved a whole cult. It was a religious cult based on President Johnson. That President Johnson was trying to send them all the good things in life, but the Australians were stealing it. And, oh yeah, they were having a devil of a time with them. Now, here is the latest report. This came in the 1st of September, Port Moresby, New Guinea, Reuters, and that's very official. Officials are building a special jail on New Hanover Island in the Trust Territory of New Guinea to contain the growing number of President Johnson cultists. Since June, administration officers, aided by armed police, have been steadily arresting islanders who refuse to pay their taxes. Instead, they want to use the money to buy President Johnson. They want to buy Johnson now as a ruler for their tiny island. Oh, the search for Superman goes on. I'm sorry, it'll go on. It'll always go on as long as there are men walking around on 2 feet. We are always and will continually look for a savior who will clear up all the problems. I don't care whether he's running for president or whether he's running for dictator or running for chief Saracen holder of our lodge. Whatever it is, he's going to finally get us on the straight and narrow. And oh, by the way, one of the great favorite phrases of all people who are searching for Superman, and he will finally steer us into the placid, peaceful waters of eternal peace. Steer us into peaceful waters. All right, the cult started during the territory's first general election last February, when about 2,000 of the island's 7,000 population refused to vote for the official candidates and attempted to write in President Johnson's name. When they were prevented from doing so, they merely withheld their taxes. The Native Affairs Director said 81 New Hanover natives were now in jail. Only the ringleaders, he said, we have, but it's growing by leaps and bounds. Well, they want to buy Johnson. How do you like that scene? Now, is that any different, though? It's very ridiculous to us. But these people really believe they need this Superman. They think Johnson is, you see, and if he came there, life would be forever beautiful on New Hanover. I don't know anything about what life is like on New Hanover without Johnson, but nevertheless, they believe that it would all clear up. Now, I'm using all in the capitalized sense. Now, millions of guys walking around in the streets of New York believe that somehow, if they could get to a tiny island somewhere, all of it would not be there. That it's only here that all of it is. I'm using it in its capitalized sense again. That if I could get to New Hanover, it would all be back here in New York or Cleveland or Paris or Rome or wherever it is that you happen to got the bug. Wherever the bug bit you, that it was all after you. And I think that this is an old mankind thing too. That all of it is after me. All of it. What is all of it? Well, I suppose life itself, whatever life is. As George Age said, life consists of a series of resolutions and relapses. It consists of a series of almost making it and then falling back two more. Speaking of almost making it and then falling on it, you know, this is WOR AM at FM New York, and we'll be here for a while. And here we've got this problem. Now I suspect, however, that the Britishers, because they are now in a long decline, certainly, since the mid-19th century, the British Empire has, even the most dedicated Britisher living out on the furthest island in the western approaches to the Great Sea, has to finally now concede that England is not the England that it was in the great days of the Empire in 1860 or 1850 or 1810. That they're beginning to be more and more just like a little island, that's all. That's it, you know. And so they know it. Well, what does this produce? Well, it's produced a very peculiar quality of realism in them. It's just like a man. It's like a man who at one point was a giant Olympic runner, who could hurl the discus and who could throw the javelin 4 miles and who could run a 3-minute mile all that. And finally, he's 74 years old and he's got a bad knee. Either he becomes a complete unrealist, either he becomes a real nut that lives in the past. There's only two ways to go. Or else he becomes even more of a realist than those who have never been great Olympic runners. This is a fact. I've known many guys who were great stars, who were tremendous stars in their day. And now they are not. They're living in Horn and Hard Arts over here on Broadway. Now, there's only two ways a man goes. I've noticed this. Either the man becomes a real fantasist, and he sits there and thinks that any minute now his agent's going to call. And any minute now Godot's going to arrive, and all those people out there on the street, he's still a great star, and he's living in the past, and all you have to do is mention 1926, comes his wallet, and 5 yellowed, withered clippings fall out, and he says, well, yes, let me show. And the next thing you know, you get the whole story of Ziegfeld's Follies all over again, you know. Now, there's that kind of guy. There's a sad one. Or is he sad? I don't know. It's hard to say, you know. You're not 74 years old and has been, so it's difficult for you to say he's sad. I'm not so sure. Many guys don't even have a past to live in. Now, that could be even sadder. Many guys have never really had anything ever happen to them all of their lives. And so finally one day they depart the mortal coil and somebody says, well, one thing about Charlie, he never lived in his past. What past? You know, he has no past to live in. Now that can be pretty sad, I'll tell you that. Then there's the other kind of guy. This is a rarer type. This is the guy who at the age of 74 has seen it all. He's been this great star. And he now knows something about mankind and about life, really, not mankind, but just life itself, the process. He knows something about this process that lesser men are never allowed to really quite glimpse. They suspect it, but they don't quite glimpse it. They don't quite feel it. And so, but he has, you see, he's been carried on the shoulders of the multitude. He has been cheered. He has read his name countless times in the newspapers. He has this great horde of followers. One thing or another. Now it's all over. Now, what has he learned? Well, he's learned something that most people never get a chance to learn, because most people never have that kind of thing happen to them. Very few people have followers. Very few. They have friends. That's not quite the same as having followers. And even probably the most subtle thing of all is to have followers you don't even know. People you'll never meet, and yet they're followers. Now, what does this do to a man? Makes him understand a lot of things that about life and about man that will never be the part of the guy who never crosses path. Only perhaps intellectually, and even then you'll never know it. And so here is this old duffer, and I've known several of them, and these guys have a look in the eye. And they're vaguely amused by things which other people are dead serious about. Really dead serious. Does it really matter if you get the novel done? Well, here he is. He's 74. He got it done. He's still 74. Nothing, his knee hurts. And he has intimations of a lot of things. And he sits there and he looks at other guys sitting at the next table. And I'll tell you this, you see in the second chapter, and they're all deeply involved. Now he looks over there, and a slight flicker of amusement plays over his lips. And it is the slight flicker that says, well, play the game now, or let them play it hard. But I hope they understand it's a game. I hope they understand that it is a G-A-M-E. And the moment the man ceases to do that and thinks somehow that his life and whatever it is he's doing is not a game, oh boy, look out. Then you get problems. Then you have the screamers and the knife fights in the dark and the demands to burn down City Hall and all the rest of it. And then you also have people growing out of that peculiar condition, looking for the man who will lead them into the green pastures, who will make it all work out the way they want it to work out. Now, what has this done to the British? Well, it's done a lot of very wild things. Here, for example, a little note from London here. It just came in today, UPI, or London. Tony Gold, a clothing salesman in London, said recently he would offer 10% discounts to neurotics. Well, don't laugh. He's not being funny. We have clothing stores here for every type of problem here in New York City. Now, he doesn't say what kind of neurotics. He doesn't say. I have a suspicion. I literally do. I have a suspicion. He doesn't say it. He doesn't come out, but I repeat, it says, Tony Gold, a clothing salesman, said recently he would offer 10% discounts to neurotics. If I think they're genuine cases, they get a discount. Mr. Tony said. Well, now that is, I don't know whether you've been in some of these places up and down Greenwich, up and down Lexington Avenue, but no one will admit it here in America. You see, that's the difference. I'm trying to say to you that England doesn't fool around anymore. They'll put a sign out in the window. It'll say a 10% discount to you-know-whats. And you come in with your pink sweater and your hair done up in curlers, and you're in business, fellas, and that's all there is to it. And you get the discount. You got to prove, though, that you are. Now, no phonies are allowed, you know. Now, only in a country that has been beset by an onslaught of reality could this happen. I mean, literally, could they put the sign out there? Now, this sneaky kind of reality, though, pops up on all sides. Now, here, for example, somebody sent me a note from Roanoke. Now, I don't know whether you know anything about Roanoke, but he sent me a clipping taken right out of the amusement page of a Roanoke paper. It's the Roanoke Times. I'd read to you. And it's from the amusement page. Remember that. And it's got these big garish ads. You know the ads that we've got in our amusement page for nightclub acts and one thing and another. Here's a big thing. It shows this chick looking out. She's dressed like an Egyptian something, with the long hair and the things hanging down, and she's holding a candle aloft. It's a wild-looking thing. It says, Sammy's 1641 9th Street SE presents the most exotic dancer that ever hit Roanoke. And she's looking out. And you can see she's exotic. And it says, Miss La Savona, direct from the best clubs in New York City. Shows 10 and 12, plus the fabulous Romans, featuring the voice himself. And underneath it, it says, salesman welcome. Ladies free. Now, I kind of like that place, you see. All right, now, wait a minute. You haven't heard the rest. And underneath it is a giant ad for a movie that simply is entitled, A House is Not a Home, from the dynamic producers of The Carpetbaggers. Starts Wednesday. All right, now, you've heard the two ads. They're one after the other. One is on top of the other. But right in between the two is a single line. Just a single line of bold type, and it says, read, heed, Billy Graham. Now, I don't know whether Billy Graham's crowd bought that ad there in between Sammy and the Fabulous Romans with Miss Lasna and A House is Not a Home, or whether it was just put in there as a public service by the guys who operate the Roanoke Times. Or whether some wise guy in the linotype department just thought he'd throw a hooker in there in the middle of all of them. Now, see, I mean, there it is. It's popping up everywhere. A few years back, that would not have occurred. I submit. It would not. A few years ago, the juxtaposition of those two things would not have happened in any newspaper. Why? I don't know. A few years ago, a guy in England would not have put up a sign that says 10% discount to neurotics. That's one way to put it. He would not have done that. Now, what kind of neurotics does he say? Oh, everybody's saying, well, no, he doesn't mean that kind. Well, what do you think he's talking about? Paranoics? Is he going to give a discount to schizoids to come in there? Which type of neurotic is he interested in? Kleptomaniacs? I doubt it. That's, is he, I don't know. Is he just interested in nervous people? Well, a nervous person is not necessarily a neurotic. You'd have a lot of trouble just say, well, I'm nervous. He'd say, well, I'm sorry. That's, a lot of people are nervous. What kind of a neurotic are you? Well, okay, give him the card, Fred. He gets the 10%. Now that is a kind of reality which I submit to you is here. It's beginning to creep into the world. Now, is this a European thing? I don't know. I'll tell you this. Here's another sort of little thing. Here's a guy sent me a note here, a card here. This is from New York Times. No, from September Popular Science. Now, it's just a little one-line ad in the want ad section of Popular Science, but it says a great deal. It simply says, genius. Become a genius. High grades. Gigantic vocabulary. Only 49 cents. Box 6, SJ7, St. Louis Mo. Now, I submit that there's something about us. It may be just a little tiny thing in the middle of... oh, by the way, right underneath it is the thing that says, improve your poor penmanship quickly. That's another ad for another outfit. And so everywhere you have it, it's beginning to pop out. Now, I don't know whether any of you have ever taken a course in anything like this. Have any of you ever submitted yourself to a correspondence course? Well, I have to tell you a story about when I'm a kid now. I'll just it's got to come out. And before we go any further, speaking of stories, I've been getting all kinds of letters from people who say, Shepherd, the next time you have a piece appear in a magazine or something, let us know about it. Well, I have a piece in the current issue of Playboy. Playboy. And, well, I think I'm a playboy. What do you mean? I play around enough. And it's terrible. Everyone secretly has great dreams of what he is. And actually all he is a guy with a bad foot. However, I have a piece in the current issue of Playboy. And it's in September issue. And it's called Grover Dill and the Tasmanian Devil. And I submit that there's a Tasmanian devil that lives next to the spleen of every one of us. Perhaps right in the spleen of every one of us. Perhaps you are the Tasmanian devil. But nevertheless, I do have a piece in the current issue of Playboy, and And I say that the time has now come for us to inundate them. And by George, even if you haven't read this piece, you write a letter to Playboy and just simply say, Shepherd more, Shepherd C, Herb Gold, no. Say, Salinger, no, Shepherd C. Say, Zsa Gabor, no, Shepherd C. Centerfold out, no, Shepherd C. I'll tell you, I have to repeat this though. I constantly get these great letters written in elegant handwriting, you know, the penmanship type letters. There are people who used to take, do they still teach penmanship in school, or do they just teach printing? I suspect they just teach grabbing the pen and printing. This is all part of the pop art world, where you just, the whole point is to print your name. And oh yeah, kids mostly print today. They don't write. Very little writing actually is done. It's more printing. But I can always tell the letters that people of people who grew up in the Spencerian handwriting world, and you see this beautiful flowing handwriting. It comes out, and they invariably refer to you by titles, one thing and another. Oh yes, and then I get the kind that says, Mr. Eugene Shepherd. Well, first of all, my name, baby, is not Eugene. It is. It is not Eugene, but I constantly get this. I kind of like it, you know, because Miss Shields, all through my second grade, called me Eugene. She refused to concede that there was a name Jean. It is not feminine; it is masculine in France. And so I get this letter, and it says, "Dear Mr. Eugene Shepherd, the other afternoon, the attention was called to me of an article which you had penned for what appears to be a popular monthly. I didn't quite catch the name of the magazine. However, I had a friend of mine pick up a copy at our friendly neighborhood newsstand. I must say you write quite well. However, the magazine I found itself extremely amusing. I don't quite remember the name of it, and the next time you appear in that magazine, would you please remind me? There's certainly some very pretty young ladies in that magazine. Thank you, Miss Amantha Christie." I love to get this kind of letter. You know, everyone secretly does not want to admit. You don't want to admit that, you know, this is stirring, but nevertheless, I can tell you this. That the problem of reality is always with us. And the problem of the desire to transmute yourself from the lead that you are into gold is probably the most devilish of all the human urges. You know, the old myth, the old idea of the old alchemists was to turn gold into, or rather turn lead into gold. Yeah, it was a whole concept. Well, the reason this had, and still does hold, a tremendous urge for us to do, it's a great desire to do it, is because we relate it to ourselves. We like to believe that somehow we can create man. We can take the lead of mankind, us, just the whole race, it, the species, and transmute it into some golden creature, some golden, fantastic creature. And you see this running through almost all of science fiction. There's been thousands of science fiction stories about man going to another planet and creating the truly beautiful race. So all the beautiful people go there. And create a beautiful. This is a recurrent theme in science fiction. It really does. If you've ever read any of it, you know that it pops up. Now that we have another idea too, which is the reverse of it. That is that somehow we have taken gold and made it into lead. Now that's the reverse of the idea. That mankind started out gold, and somehow he has been able to transmute himself into lead. Now they're both really the same idea. And so running through one type of science fiction writer, you'll find that somewhere up on this other planet there are the beautiful creatures that will be contaminated by man. Man will come and louse it up and reduce these beautiful creatures to the lead that mankind is. Now, this is another recurring theme, but they're both the same thing, see. And so as a kid, I'll tell you, I was constantly assailed by these things. Kids are really open to it more than adults, because a kid is more conscious of his shortcomings. The adult, in many ways, has learned to live with them. He's made all kinds of adjustments, rationalizations, one thing and another. But the kid can't figure out why he is a little skinny runt. Well, nobody will say to him, well, it's because, Fred, you've got bad genes, Your family goes all the way back to the first cavemen. They were little skinny runts. That's the way it is. That's what, bad genes. And that's the end of it. He's a little skinny nothing, and that's the end of it. Well, he sees an ad on the back that says, I was once a 97-pound weakling. And now, and it shows this gigantic man. He's cracking chains around his muscles. He's 17 feet tall. And then there's that little thing underneath it that shows, the guy getting the sand kicked in his face on the beach. All right. How many little squirts right now with pimply faces got sand kicked into their face right on Jones Beach this past weekend? Well, a lot of guys just don't go on the beach. They sit back there and now they give up. You see, the adult, he gives up and he sits there and eats nothing but clam broth and watches the other guys get sand kicked in their face. That's the end of it. Well, now here, the kid, though, he rails against this. He says, why am I? So he is very tempted to send in that thing that says, in 7 days, I can prove to you, in just 5 minutes a day, that you can become a giant among men, that your muscles can bulge and ripple along your back, and that you will be a feared force, a tornado in your neighborhood. Well, the next thing you know, off it goes. All right, now there's that part. There's that thing. You see, that's the physical. Now, then, on the other hand, we have guys who sit around and their head is solid cheesecake, between the ears. And they can't figure out why they're a chowderhead. They see these other guys writing books. They see these other guys got fancy answers to the questions. Now, there's two ways you can react to that. You can either hit them, and that's one way. Just hit those guys. That's all. Or you can sit in the back row and plot and try to figure out why it is you got cheesecake between the ears. Now that's a problem. So always there's a little ad for those guys. It'll say, do you want to be a genius? Do you want to get great grades? Do you want to have a fantastic, insightful mind? Do you want to become a creative writer and write a gigantic bestseller about how tortured your soul is? Do you want to be... The next thing you know, there it is. It says, yes, I do. Please rush me at once. That great coupon that always says, yes, I accept your challenge. Rush me at once in plain sealed wrapper. Your instructions, I am 21. And so on. Say, well, all right. Now, here you've got the problem. So at the age of about 9, I remember distinctly the long afternoons that I spent mulling this one over. And it so happens that most of us are hung up on the very thing which we don't really quite have. Big, hefty guys with muscles do not read Charles Atlas commercials. They just don't. They're just too busy kicking sand in guys' face. They're not going to be writing in stuff and reading magazines about how to have big bulging muscles. I mean, so it's not true. Well, it just so happened I didn't have that problem. I was not hung up. I did my share of sand kicking. I face that now. There it is. However, I did have another problem. I happened to go around with a bunch of kids, all of whom were about 4 or 5 years older than I was. And almost all of them had a tremendous knowledge, at least I thought so at the time, of electronics. These guys were really sharp, and one guy had his ham ticket, and another guy was building a lot of test equipment. And I'd sit back there in the background, and I'd pretend I'd make a one-tube radio. You see, and it took me 6 months to get it going. And I would always take it over to one of the other guys' houses, you see, and say, well, I just want to run a few tests, Fred, on your Volomist. And, of course, by the time I would leave the house, Fred would have gotten it going for me, you see, and I pretended I did it. Well, one day, out of the back pages of a magazine, there is a finger pointing right at me. And it says, you can accrue the knowledge of all the technical, modern improvements that have recently been part of the fast-moving electronic world. You can reap great riches You can become a top serviceman. You can become a top radio engineer. You can become a top experimenter in the growing field of electronics. Do you remember that guy pointing out of the magazines? And underneath it said J.E. Smith. Yes, sir, a man named J.E. Smith. And he had some kind of an institute somewhere. And it says, I will send you a lesson. And underneath it says, yes, rush me at once, your free sample lesson that will enable me to realize and recognize immediately on how fast I can learn this great new unfolding field of electronics. And underneath it, of course, it said, there was the line that says, you must be 21, and so on. So old Shep sits down there one dark night. I clip it out of Hugo Gernsback's shortwave craft or radio craft or one of these things, and J.E. Smith is looking right out at me, and he looks so solid. And underneath it says, learn all about superheterodynes. Learn all about neutrodynes. Learn all about test equipment. Learn about how transmitters work. Yes, in just 7 minutes a day, you can be earning, like J.L. of Hattiesburg, Mississippi, up to $4 a week in your spare time servicing the neighbors. Yes, I write this thing down. And there it says, yes, rush me at once. Your free lesson on the superhet. Rush it to me at once, and then in 30 days, I will make my... So I write this thing down, and I send it off in the dark of the moon. And a couple of weeks later, it started. I'll tell you, it was like a new door opening up to me. I'm watching the mailbox, being very casual. Because, you know, a kid of 9 does not tip off to his parents at home that he has just sent off something that's liable to cost the family $6 million, before it's over. The kid does not want to concede that either. Have you noticed Charles Atlas never tells you how much those bulging muscles are going to cost? He does not mention this. You see, the kid never really quite, but he has an inkling. That's a great word, by the way, inkling. It is different from an idea. Inkling just means a little bell is going ding, 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 ding in the back. That means trouble, an inkling. So off goes the thing. Well, about 2 weeks later, I get a big, beautiful blue envelope. And on the outside, in big red letters, it says, it's here! Your future! It's here! Earn big money in radio! And I get this thing, and my old man sees it on the dining room table there with all the bills that he gets. There it is. It's addressed to me. It's here, your future. And here I am, earning big money in radio.